Dawn broke over the prairie like a wounded sigh. The storm had passed, but the land still breathed with rain, mud glistening under pale light, fences broken, the sky a wash of dull silver. A lone rider moved through it, slow and deliberate, his hat brim dripping, his coat heavy with water and dust. Elias Hart hadn't spoken a word since yesterday's wind took the last of his firewood. Silence clung to him the way guilt does, to bone and breath alike. They said the prairie could cleanse a man if he rode long enough through the rain. But some stains, Elias knew, sank too deep for washing. He caught sight of movement ahead, black wings circling low above the ridge. Vultures. His horse snorted, uneasy. As he crested the rise, he saw it, a shape half buried in the mud, the broken body of a mare struck down by the storm. Her hide was slick with rain and ash, her breath long gone. But beside her, tangled in reeds and shaking on newborn legs, stood a foal that it cried, a thin, helpless sound that cracked the distance. The kind of sound that tore through a man's ribs and reminded him of something he'd buried deep. Elias froze. The foal's coat was the color of pale smoke. Its eyes, wide and wet, mirrored his own memory, the night years ago when fire had swallowed his home, his wife, his boy. He felt his throat close. The same helplessness rose like floodwater. He turned his horse away, whispering under his breath, "Not mine to save." But when he glanced back, the foal stumbled after him, legs buckling, hooves sliding in the muck. It fell hard, let out a cry so thin and human it made the sky flinch. Elias stopped. His fingers clenched the reins. That sound, it weren't just a cry. It was a memory begging not to die. As he turned back, the foal was trembling, too weak to stand. He knelt beside it, reins soaking his knees. For a moment he just stared, unsure if he was trying to save it or himself. Then he took his coat off and laid it over the small body. "Easy, little one," he murmured, voice rasped from years of silence. "Easy now." He cut a rope from his saddle, looped it gently around the foal's neck, and led it away from the carcass of its mother. The sky was darkening again, thunder growling low. They walked through fields of wet grass until they found a shack, half collapsed, forgotten, leaning against a hill like a tired old man. Inside, the roof leaked and the air smelled of rot. Elias struck a match and lit the broken lantern. He set the foal down on a patch of dry hay and worked clumsily to dry it off with his coat. The animal blinked at him through wet lashes. In the lamplight, he thought, the creature looked too small for this cruel world. But so was I once. He rummaged through his pack, found a tin of milk and an old rag. It took him a dozen tries to get the foal to drink. His hands shook, his patience thinner than the light. But when the foal finally sucked weakly at the cloth, Elias felt something break loose inside his chest. Something long frozen began to melt. He spoke to it softly, the way a man speaks to ghosts. "You ain't alone out here." When dawn returned, Elias rode into Renfield. The rain had eased, but the streets still shimmered with puddles and gossip. He tied his horse outside the general store. Heads turned, whispers followed. He was used to that. Folks remembered him, the ranch hand who'd lost his herd, the drifter who drank himself near mad after the fire. Deputy Cole Avery leaned on a post, a toothpick between his lips. "Didn't figure you for keeping company with orphans, Hart," he said with a half-smile. Elias didn't answer. He bought milk, oats, and rags. The storekeeper avoided his eyes but took his money quick enough. Outside, a woman waited beside. A wagon, dark hair tied back, dust on her boots, the kind of calm that came from surviving too much. Clara Wynne. Folks said she ran her ranch alone since her husband died. Folks also said she wouldn't last the year. She watched Elias struggle to load his supplies. "Need a hand?" she asked. Voice steadied. He shook his head. "Got it." Her gaze drifted to the small tarp near his saddle. The foal's nose poked out, sniffing the air. Clara's face softened. "You found it out there?" Elias hesitated, then gave a quiet nod. She smiled just a little, sad, knowing. "Poor thing. The storms take the mothers first." He didn't reply, but something in her tone stayed with him. That night, back at the shack, her words echoed as he fed the foal again. It tried to stand on shaky legs, its tail flicking weakly. "She followed me like a shadow afraid to lose its shape," he thought. Days turned into a quiet rhythm. Feeding, cleaning, resting. The prairie outside was wide and empty, but the shack began to feel less so. Sometimes he'd talk aloud without meaning to, telling the full stories of old trail days, of horses he once owned, of a little boy who'd laughed at thunder. When he slept, dreams came: fire, smoke, and someone calling his name through the crackle. He woke with a start, whispering, "I couldn't save him." The foal nuzzled against his arm, soft and forgiving. He let it stay close point one morning. Hoofs sounded outside. Clara went again, this time with a sack of hay and a pail of water. She looked around the place, frowned at its decay, then smiled at the foal. "She's got fight in her," she said, crouching to stroke its head. "That's something worth saving." Elias only grunted, but the ghost of a smile tugged at his mouth. Clara straightened. "I could use someone who knows horses. If you stay out here, neither of you'll make it through winter." He looked away, rain dripping from the roof between them. He wanted to refuse, wanted to stay buried with his ghosts. But then the foal pressed her head into his palm, as if choosing for him. He nodded once that Clara's eyes softened. "Good. Come on then." Thunder rumbled somewhere far off, low and familiar. Elias gathered his things, threw the saddle on his horse, and led the foal into the gray dawn. The storm clouds were parting, thin lights spilling across the prairie. He didn't know it yet, but that small act, the choosing to follow, was the first mercy he'd given himself in years. The Wind Ranch sat at the edge of a valley, half swallowed by tall grass and quiet wind. The fences leaned, the barn sagged, but the land still held its breath like it remembered being whole once. When Elias arrived, the morning light was soft and yellow, cutting through the mist that rose from the fields. Clara was already at work, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, hammer in hand. She didn't say much when he rode in. Just a nod, a look that said, "You came." He lifted the small foal from the wagon. The little creature blinked at the world, still shaky but stronger now. Over the next days, the rhythm of life returned, small, steady beats. Elias fixed the fences. Clara mended saddles. The foal, whom Clara called Ash, followed Elias everywhere. When he knelt to patch a rail, she tugged gently at his sleeve. When he walked to the creek, she trailed behind, her reflection glimmering in the water beside his own. Sometimes Clara would watch them from the porch. There was something tender in the way the cowboy spoke to the animal, though the words were few. It was as if he understood that both creature and man were learning to trust again. In her eyes, Elias thought one dusk, "I saw what the land used to look like before it forgot how to forgive." But peace, in small towns, draws gossip like flies to honey to the general store. Voices whispered, "Widow winds taken in a drifter. Man's cursed. I heard. Lost everything in a fire. Not right. Her keeping him on her place." When word reached Deputy Cole, he rode out under the pretense of checking fences. He found Elias shoeing a horse by the corral. "Careful, Hart," Cole said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "Some of us remember what happens when you start feeling settled." Elias didn't look up, just doing the work. Cole tilted his hat. "Work don't stop talk." Later that evening, Elias packed quietly. The moon was thin and silver over the barn. He fastened his saddle, tied his pack. He wasn't leaving because of fear, just habit. A man like him didn't stay anywhere long enough to be forgiven. But as he opened the gate, Ash stepped in front of him. Her body had grown lean and sure over the months, her eyes steady on him. She wouldn't move. Elias exhaled through his nose, a weary smile ghosting across his face. "Don't make this harder, girl." She didn't flinch. Then he heard footsteps behind him, soft ones. Clara stood in the lantern glow, hands clasped. "If you're leaving because of them," she said, "you're letting strangers write your story." He looked at her, unsure if he had a story left worth writing. "I don't belong anywhere." She took a step closer. Maybe that's what belonging feels like at first, like it doesn't fit yet. The air hung between them, thick with all that hadn't been said. Then Elias dropped his pack. In the months that followed, life bloomed again. Grass thickened, the barn roof held against storms, and laughter returned to the ranch like birds after winter. Clara rode more often now, Elias teaching her to rein steady, to trust her balance. They moved like two people who had forgotten how to be alone. When she fell once, he was there in an instant, hands steadying her by the waist. She looked up at him, cheeks flushed, and the silence between them turned softer than words. They didn't fall in love like in stories. It happened quietly, between shared work, gentle glances. The hush of evenings spent mending tack while the fire cracked in the hearth. He carved a small wooden horse from an old fence post one night and left it on her windowsill before dawn. She found it later, tracing the rough grain with her fingers, smiling to herself. Then summer came hard and bright. The fields swayed gold, and for a time, everything felt steady. Until the sky turned black again. The storm rolled in fast, lightning splitting the horizon, thunder rolling like God's drum. Rain hit the roof in wild sheets. Elias was in the barn with Ash, calming her trembling body when the flash came, a strike to the ridgepole, then fire. The dry straw caught fast. Flames climbed the walls, licking toward the rafters. Smoke poured through the stalls. For a moment, Elias couldn't move. His breath caught. The world narrowed into the sound of crackling timber and memory. The same smell, the same heat. He saw the barn from years ago, the silhouettes inside, the screams that never reached him in time. Outside, Clara's voice cut through the storm. Elias. He stood frozen, trembling like the foal had that first night in the rain. The fire roared higher. Ash cried, trapped behind a fallen beam. Then Clara's hand caught his arm. You can't lose her too. Those words broke something loose. He lunged forward through the smoke, tearing the beam away with burned hands. The mare's coat flashed in the firelight as he led her out, stumbling into the night air. The barn groaned, then collapsed behind them in a rain of sparks. Clara dragged him clear, coughing, her arms around him as he collapsed in the wet grass. Ash stood shaking beside them, alive. Dawn came pale and smoky. The barn was a skeleton of ash, but the sun rose gold behind it. Clara wrapped Elias's burned hands in linen. He stared at them, the same hands that had once failed to save everything he loved. Now, they had saved something. I saved her this time, he whispered. She smiled faintly, brushing soot from his cheek. You did. He looked up at the sky. The fire had taken much, but it had also left something behind. Stillness, maybe peace. Some fires burn what's gone, he said softly. Some light what's left. When the townsfolk came later, they didn't bring gossip. They brought wood, nails, bread. No one spoke of the past anymore. They worked beside him in silence, as if rebuilding was apology enough. Ash grazed in the pasture, her coat shining in the new light. Clara stood beside Elias, her hand slipping into his, quiet, certain by the next sunrise, a frame of a new barn stood where the old one had burned. The land smelled of wet ash and renewal, and somewhere deep in the morning, the narrator's voice rose, slow and old as the plains themselves. I once thought the West was a place for men to run from what they'd lost. But maybe it's where we come to meet it again, gentler this time. The camera drifts wide, Ash galloping across the open field, the horizon stretching endless and golden. Elias and Clara stand side by side, watching, the light catching their faces like forgiveness. If you ever find something broken out on the plain, the voice continues, fading with the wind, be it a creature, a heart, or your own name, don't turn away. The saving of it might just save you too. And then the sun lifts over the valley, and the story breathes its last, a quiet, hopeful exhale.